Warning, this podcast may contain reference to abuse of a physical, verbal, or sexual nature. This podcast may also include opinions that people do not agree with. Thank you for listening. You never really know, but what I do know is we are live for episode 7.
Episode 7.
So, last week, God, that was a lot of anger that needed vented.
Oh, God. Yeah, just all of it. I don't think we've ever been so angry for an episode, ever.
The joy of waiting a week and being dosed up on so many painkillers.
Oh, I think it's a case of you're dosed up on painkillers and I just cannot give a fuck anymore.
Yeah. But although, speaking of not giving a fuck or giving a fuck, the 6-page script that you sent.
Oh gosh, yeah. No, yeah, I just suddenly had this thought while I was in the bath one night, and it was just, I just suddenly realised how all the award-winning novels, say like the Booker Prize, the Pulitzer Prize, and stuff like that, and when they feature queer figures, I suddenly realised that it's just like, great, they can't say anything worth saying when it comes to heteronormative relationships. They're now using and baiting queer people.
It is very much queer baiting, isn't it? It is the definition almost.
Yeah, it's like they'll write queer stories, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that.
No, I mean queer stories need to be told.
They do, and obviously it posits a new point of view for readers who probably wouldn't usually read such stories. Best examples are A Little Life. I cannot remember her name, and Sebastian Barry's World Without End. There have been plenty of straight people who have written queer stories. My big problem with it is the fact of these writers win all the awards for these books, whereas there are better books with better storylines, more authentic, in not only just the queer experience, but in also the joys, the sorrows, the ups and downs, the actual real life queer experience.
The lived emotion.
Just the lived experience, and they get almost little to no attention whatsoever. My prime example, and I have a huge problem with it, is Andre Ackerman's Call Me By Your Name.
Oh. Because Andre was straight, wasn't he?
Andre Ackerman is a straight man,
right?
And he got praised to high heaven for writing this book. For me, and it's not an opinion a lot of people share, but for me, it's a case of it's the gay Lolita.
That's you're gonna have to walk me through this one.
So
I have my tea ready.
Yeah. So the story of Call Me By Your Name, it's told from the perspective of a 17-year-old boy, who lives out in Italy with his Jewish family, from America, and they have a student teacher come in and assist the boy Elio's dad.
Right.
And so the boy sort of kind of throws himself at the guy's feet. This guy is 10 years his senior.
This sounds like plot of a really bad porno.
It does. And it becomes grossly uncomfortable. The only reason why people like it is it's artsy. Somehow it speaks to them. And you know what? It might speak to some people. That is totally fine. But at the same time, it is posited by a straight person as the gay experience. And he was told he was brave for doing it. He got all the awards for it. He got a film deal out of it because it was somehow an artsy film. And I watched it. It was grossly uncomfortable.
I hate that excuse with so many things of the idea that if it's artsy, you can get away with it. Or if it's artsy, then it doesn't take away the authenticity in a way. Or basically if it's artsy fartsy flooziness, then every kind of wrong in it is forgiven.
It felt like, the book and the film feels like fetishization. It feels like fetishism, and it made me grossly uncomfortable because as a queer individual and as a gay writer, there are so many books out there that actually tell genuine queer stories from queer perspectives, written by actual queer people, that get brushed under the carpet.
Yeah. I mean, I have noticed that. There's not very much, I don't see very much when it comes to queer literature, or even queer media actually pushed towards me. Like, don't get me wrong, like, it's become more common as I've gotten older, thanks to the world being more accepting and whatnot, like, you know, and of course, the more controversy there is around the LGBT community, the more we hear about it. Take Lil Nas X and his Call Me By Your Name song. That was...
Montero, that was gorgeous.
That was amazing.
Thank you so much.
I didn't even make the connection that he was also the one that did, I can't remember the name of it, but it had Billy Ray Cyrus. I guess digging it. Like, I mean, but it really opened my eyes to, oh, holy shit, there is a, you know, LGBT singer out there, a musician out there.
A rapper.
Fucking awesome.
Oh, I loved it. And I loved seeing the reactions to it, actually. And there was
amazing.
there was a pastor that's going like, is he going down to hell?
Yes.
He's going down the pole into hell. And then he's giving Satan a lap dance. And I'm sat there just going like, yes. Yeah. But then there was always the opinion that Lil Nas X was doing it to piss off the evangelical Christians. And I'm sat there just going like, well... Probably, because guess what? It's so easy. Like, you don't even have to try to piss off an evangelical Christian.
He literally managed to piss off the evangelical Christian belief system by turning around and going, yeah, you're right, guys. Like, how can you be angry that he's like, yeah, I agree with you? Like,
I know.
Oh, it was beautifully done.
It was.
Well done.
It was such a clapback. It is the clapback of the century, and I love it. A Wendy's clapback on Twitter could not rival that. I was so happy to be gay that day.
But yeah, even as a straight guy, I was watching that, and it was entertaining.
It really was.
But I feel like we need to open the gates for more LGBT, queer kind of writers and even directors and animators, or excuse me, down my Dr. Pepper too fast. And things like that. We need to open up the gates for more creativity and more expression like that, because I mean, I've noticed in a lot of ways, like, you get the kind of artsy fartsy, oh, look at me, I'm so rich, I can be artistic. But in my opinion, and it's not an opinion everyone agrees with, and that's perfectly okay with me, conflicting opinions bring evolution. But I believe that art comes a lot from having suffered, and so who would be able to write a very, very enticing, beautifully done queer story than someone who has felt it, someone who has suffered through it and has decided to deal with that in a creative aspect.
Like, I'm by no means gatekeeping on the gay experience, but no, it's like...
Be shocked if you can, because I directed things with gay people.
And yet I have not kicked you in the throat for it.
Exactly.
But no, it's like there are so many writers out there, both classic and modern, that no one has been paying attention to. Like, my big lists, and this will probably appear in the description box every time, but things like Mary Reynolds' The Charioteer, which is a novel about this young gay man in World War II. He's just come back from Dunkirk. And he's recovering, and he's having to choose between a conscientious objector with whom he's fallen in love with, or the boy that he was at school with. And the charioteer of the title, it's actually the Platonic idea. I believe it's from the Phaedrus. And it is this charioteer who's trying to rein in two horses. One is white, one is dark. The white horse is Platonic love. It's this idealism of romance and same-sex desire. Okay. Whereas the dark horse is the underbelly of that. It is the sexual desire. It is passion. Yeah. It's all the sort of the grittiness and stuff like that.
Yeah, the rawness.
It's the rawness. And the character, Laurie, has to choose between them. And then we've got the entire oeuvre of James Baldwin. Giovanni's Room, especially, which is one of the best queer books I've ever read. And then we've got Christopher Isherwood's Single Man, or Goodbye to Berlin, or Mr. Norris Changes Trains.
Mm-hmm.
All these books tell the gay experience as they were.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of writers now that tell the gay experience as they are. Like, most modern queer writing, I've found the best of it can actually be found in young adult literature.
That would make sense.
Yeah, and it's so much better than most. Like, modern realist LGBT fiction usually tends to be written by straight people.
Which is, ironically, fiction.
Yeah, but basically...
Or fictitious, I guess is the word.
It is fictitious. It posits a fictitious version of the gay experience. Like, from a big example is A Little Life.
Right.
And that book is about 800 pages. It is
a big book.
It's a struggle because most of it is just pain, suffering, abuse, torment, and all that sort of stuff. And I'm sat there just going like, I can't read this.
Yeah, I mean,
I read it when it first came out, and about 2 months after I'd finished it, it took me about 3 weeks to finish. 2 months after that, it was sat on my shelf. And then I went out in the middle of the night, took the book with me, went down to the river and threw the book into the river.
Wow.
I could not give that to a charity shop. I was just like, I'm not letting this book hurt anyone else more as it's hurt me. Because though like trauma and death and abuse and torment, that is part of the gay experience.
Unfortunately.
But that is not all the gay experience is. Well, there is great joy, there is great unity. Like, my favourite book, one of my favourite compilations of queer life actually, is The Stonewall Reader. Mm-hmm. And these posit views and opinions and fiction and interviews before, during, and after Stonewall. So it shows an evolution.
I was about to say, that's quite a turbulent time, so that's a good...
Very much. Like, the first story is an excerpt from Audre Lorde, from Zami, A New Spelling of My Name, her biomythography. And I absolutely love that word. Just to preface, biomythography. I absolutely adore that word.
Word of the week.
Mm-hmm. And it just shows us like, well, this was my experience as a person of colour, a woman, a lesbian, and a poet before Stonewall. And it's fantastic. And you can tell the language, she revels in the life that she's lived.
Yeah.
And there were others like Adrienne Rich, who was married, and then she came out.
Yeah.
She'd left her husband. She became a poet and relished in that. And there are just so many writers out there who deserve the attention that don't get the attention that they actually deserve.
Which, in my opinion, they do need. Mm-hmm. They need to put out there.
They do. Like, when I was in Waterstones during Pride Month, the Pride Month wall was mediocre. Oh. That was upsetting.
No shade to the staff at Dundee.
Oh, no, absolutely.
You guys do amazing. Richard, get more cards.
Oh, no, absolutely. I love Waterstones. Our Waterstones is fantastic. They know me by name and sight. It's scary.
I was about to say, I think me and you have built up a terrifying rapport with them between my manga addiction and your reading addiction.
We really have. It's unreal. But it is a case of the books that were there, like you had the usual, you had Sarah Waters, you had a few James Baldwins, you had Juno Dawson.
So you had a few.
You had a few, but it was a case of, it was just one measly wall.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, like having a wall dedicated to LGBT writers is good. But in my completely unhumble and, kind of cis straight white guy opinion, so feel free to ignore it. Oh, you probably deserve it. But yeah, back to the point. Like, I feel like, in all honesty, we should kind of have a wall all year round, like specifically for LGBT
like a
authors.
section of itself.
Just even if it's only for a few years or decades, just something to normalize and get names out there, rather than once a month have 4 or 5 books kind of thing from the same authors over and over. We want new authors out there. We want to hear the experiences of everyone, not just rich white old fogies that have decided that they think they know what X, Y, or Z experience is.
See, for me, it's like what really annoys me is just how LGBT fiction is actually categorized in itself. It's just shoved into fiction where you probably will never find it.
Yeah.
So it's just shoved into all-around fiction, whereas if you had like a section in a bookshop dedicated to just LGBT fiction, non-fiction, autobiography by itself.
Yeah. I mean,
that would have been so much more helpful to me when I was coming out and I was looking for gay stories to like normalize
so that you
how
could
I
connect.
felt, basically. And I couldn't find that. I had to like scroll through an entire section and not knowing what I was looking for, because there is no LGBT fiction section in any bookshop that I've actually seen, unless you're going to like one of the proper LGBT bookshops, say like Category is Books in Glasgow or Gay's the Word in London. There's nothing like that in like Dundee or in Edinburgh.
So if my partner ever gets her dream, there will be like, because they've always wanted a bookstore. Like just to own a bookstore / like Mad Hatter themed cafe with it.
Yes.
I promise you, if that ever happens, I am making LGBT soul section and I'm painting it rainbows.
I need this in my life. Bookshop and cafe. I would literally live in there.
That would be the point. It would be 24 hours. We'd have you as one of the clerks. But yeah, I feel like that would be, adding that kind of thing would be really good because, like, you know, you hear the word representation a lot, and I feel like a lot of people think that means, you know, throw a gay person in there and it's fine. But representation, the idea isn't just throw a gay person in there to subdue the screams. The idea is to give LGBTQ people someone that they can look up to, someone that they can connect with and feel like a hero. Because, like, I mean, you know, white guys have had that all their fucking life in games and writing and whatnot. Like, even, like, all the way from normal people to goths, like, guys have tons of heroes. You've got people like Dorian Gray on the darker side of that, or you have Solid Snake in games, and, you know, Goku from Dragon Ball, and yes, Dragon Ball's Japanese, but Goku is designed to be white. And that's just how the mangaka made him. But it's like we all have these heroes that we can look up to, and we're missing that in the LGBT community, I see.
Heteronormativity, when heterosexual people, especially men, have had dozens and dozens of role models and stories geared to them. And so I can't really get why people are so angry when gay stories are suddenly told. And I'm sat there just going like, so this is like one or two out of the millions and millions of books, films, and other media that is geared towards you, and suddenly you're getting all precious about it.
Yeah.
And like what you were saying with representation, like representation is good because it posits a different point of view.
Yeah.
Even if you are not of that branch, it is still important to be able to posit that point of view. And I was actually talking to it, like, before I sent that 6-paragraph scroll to you, I actually sent it to a book chat of mine that I was part of, and still am part of, actually. We were reading Lord of the Rings over 2020 through the summer, just to get us through, because we'd have gone mad. And they were talking about, completely agree with it, but it's also, you also have to consider the showing of a different point of view, and it's like how that is necessary. And I was like, I know, I completely agree with that. It's the fact of they get awards for this sort of stuff, like
it's they're taking the recognition from
away from us. Yeah, it's like another example I actually have. It's Susan Hill's Bird of Night, which has been recognized as a queer classic as well. Another straight woman, conservative straight woman, writing about queer life. It's about a young man who fell in love with a poet after he'd come back from World War One, and everyone was sat there just going like, "Oh, she's like the most outstanding talents in contemporary English fiction," and without a beat. I loved it. And the only woman to tear this book apart, and I thank her for it, was, you guessed it, Angela Carter.
Every time, I swear.
Every time. But no, she tore this book apart, and she just said, well, it's a nice middle-class book about a nice middle-class nutter. And I was like, yeah.
This podcast is not sponsored by Angela Carter. Still, one day, you will come back and you will sponsor us, because at this point it's getting crazy.
It is. But no, I just remember it. And and she was deeply offended by it. I was deeply offended by it because it sat there just going like, she is, though she writes beautifully, I will never take that away from her. It was the story of it. It was just this really kind of thing.
It sounds like another bad porn plot.
And it was just awful.
Yeah.
I was actually really upset by it. But there are queer books out there, and especially in young adult fiction, that are actually written by queer writers like Patrick Ness. I want to say Benjamin Sains, who wrote Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe.
That sounds fun.
That was a beautiful book. I cried so much. It was just so beautiful. But no, having to scroll through that when I was younger, I had absolutely nothing like that. So here was me screaming through fiction, trying to find something I wasn't even sure they would have. Because I had it drummed into me that somehow that like being gay was somehow bad, or like to read a gay book was somehow dirty in some way.
I mean, I
found one in the end. I found a book in the end. It was E.M. Forster's Morris.
Okay.
And written 1913 to 1914. It was not brought out until 1971, a year after Forster's death.
I can see why it wasn't brought out. Fucking crime that it wasn't, though.
And it's like, it was more a case of, he had a note pinned to that manuscript and he said, publishable but worth it. And that was understandable. It's not his best work, however, it is still a fantastic piece of queer fiction. And actually, it's probably one of the first gay books that actually have a happy ending.
See, that's one thing that, I noticed as well in a lot of gay literature, and that is it almost leaves you, like, especially ones written by straight people, because I notice it's always with straight people that this happens, is the idea that if it's a book about the LGBT community, and, like, if it's a gay book or something, it has to have a bad ending.
It's like people...
You inherit this... You just have to inherit the depression and the abuse all the time. And stuff
like that. Yeah, it's like people either are dying of AIDS, or they can't be together, or someone's like, oh, I've outgrown it, I've got a wife and kids now.
Why not change the narrative for gay people to have a happy ending like straight people? Because I feel like they deserve one.
Yeah, it's like, I think the most honest writer in queer fiction actually was Larry Kramer, who was a leading member and founder of Gay Men's Health Crisis in the 80s, coming up to the height of the AIDS epidemic. He was the only one that stood up to Fauci at the height of the AIDS epidemic, who was literally just middling. He was doing nothing.
I forgot that, he was definitely not known to be the most active person in that.
No, and he also... he was kicked out of Gay Men's Health Crisis, and then they started ACT UP. The reason why he was kicked out of Gay Men's Health Crisis was because he was a stirrer, and he got angry because everyone was just like, they were fighting amongst each other, and he was the only one to say the truth. Like, there was a famous speech actually that he'd made, and it's been recorded, that he was shouting down someone who was just giving an excuse, and all he screamed was, "Plague! It's a fucking plague!"
I will have to see if I can find a link to a recording of it.
You will be able to find it. I can probably find it for you. We'll put it in the description. Insane, yeah.
But I mean, one that sounds like me in any kind of leadership role. Just, no, you're all wrong. Do it right. But it sounds like almost we needed someone like him during the... I keep saying we, I'm not even LGBT, but you know what I mean. But yeah, it sounds like that something like that was needed.
It's nice that people want to tell gay stories, but it's a case of they're free to write the story they please, but it's also a case of when you're writing queer stories, you better be prepared for the amount of letdown that you're giving people.
On top of that as well, to any publisher that somehow has the stomach to listen to this, and I know that out of the total 20 people, maybe
maybe
watch us,
you never know.
Who knows? But yeah, out of that, I doubt any of them are book publishers or movie directors or that, or not even directors, but producers. Stop judging on are they straight enough to be famous basis, and start judging on how much of a reaction does this get me, and how much hope can this bring a set of people that honestly need hope.
Yeah, judge it on the quality of the actual work.
Yeah. Rather than on if they're straight enough, because that's horrible.
Well, see, that was actually a problem that was faced by Mary Shelley. Actually, she took Frankenstein, which was her very first novel, to her husband's publisher.
Go Dundee.
The publisher didn't even bother to read the bloody thing, and he gave her a rejection on the basis of some bullshit excuse, and she called him out, just going like, yeah, you would know about the book if you actually read the damn thing. And she called him out, and the reason why he wouldn't was literally because it was a woman who had written it.
Yeah, and it's no different today when it comes to award ceremonies and that. I mean, it's hard for women to win prizes as it is, and it's even harder for LGBT to win it as it is. And then you end up with people, unfortunately, turns this horrible way of, like, allies and that get pointed in the wrong direction of things to be angry at as well.
Like, most recently, actually, the 2020 Booker Prize was won by Douglas Stewart, Shuggie Bain, a queer writer writing a queer story. And I thought that was a massive win for us.
Yeah, that was a
massive, massive win.
All it took was the end of the world.
Basically. And it was such a great book. Like, it was authentic. It was Scottish. It's written by a queer person, so it talked to a lot of people. It talked to me especially, and it's such a great book. It totally deserved that award. But in a lot of ways, like things like in America, where the National Book Award is a thing, like there's a lot of books by straight people writing about the queer experience, and I'm just becoming so damn tired. Are you okay?
Yeah, if it comes up on the recording, that snap was my my shoulder dislocating there.
Jesus Christ! Jesus.
He's got nothing to do with this.
Of course he doesn't.
It's an autoimmune disorder.
Yeah, and of course he's got nothing to do with it. He's mangling you.
Yeah. But yeah, I understand the tiredness there.
Yeah. I'm so fatigued.
Yeah, again, back to the fatigue thing. But I mean, it's like this. I mean, I think today. So again, as you know, we record the day after we bring out our last episode. So today we're recording. It's the 24th of August. It is Sophie Lancaster Day. Yeah. And yeah, the subject of fatigue again. It has been. I've lost count of how many years now, but it is another anniversary of the poor girl. And yeah, again, don't get me wrong, goths and that, like I said, episodes and episodes ago, and by that I mean like episode 1. Like, goths don't have as much to worry about as LGBT or people of color or even women in some cases. All we have to do to not get beat up is just change our clothing style. Excuse me again. But yeah, however, at the same time, it's unfair that we still feel like that has to be an option in a lot of cases. And again, it's today's the anniversary of her and her boyfriend getting attacked.
And the poor girl died.
Yeah.
I remember hearing about it on the news, but when I was in acting and performance, actually, it was my first year, and we went to see someone come in, and it was her mum, and she was telling the story.
Yeah.
And there was an animation made of it. It was a film, and it broke me. It absolutely broke me, and it's the fact of she didn't just die being attacked. She died protecting her boyfriend because she knelt over him to defend him from the blows that were raining down. She took the majority of it.
It's not like they started a fight or anything. Which
no, they were just walking down the street.
I know that that's a misconception that people, even in my family, had, was that, well, clearly they did something to antagonize them. And it's like, no, he got attacked, and all she did was try and ask them to stop and get in the way of the attacks. I mean, the girl, it's not even like hero is the right word. She is a hero.
She is.
But at the same time, all she was trying to do was stop her partner from dying. For no, because it was senseless violence.
I know, it's the fact of, for some reason, like, for someone to attack say like I was attacked or you were attacked.
Very common thing.
Yeah, and it's like, it's more common than I like to admit. And it's the fact of somehow they need a reason. And you think, I was like, oh, you must have done something. And I was like, no, I was walking down the street. I did nothing. And it's the fact of they chose to do this to me.
With me, it was always the excuse of, well, if you didn't dress like it was Halloween. And it's like, I am wearing a red tie, a loose black shirt, a black suit blazer that's open, and black trousers with some Cuban heels. The hell is Halloween about that, other than the fact that I've got my hair tied up like a samurai? Like,
it's beggars belief. I absolutely hate it. And it's the fact of, for some reason, they feel justified in doing what they do to us. And the fact it was like, oh, they must have done something. And it was like...
So no, we exist.
We do nothing. We literally just exist. That is enough reason for them. Yeah. Nothing else. I don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything.
Nope.
Other than the fact of breathe and exist. That is all the reason they need to hurt us.
And again, Sophie Lancaster is a prime example. So I remember, and I still have it, I recorded the documentary or the like retelling of the story in that, and it's every rewatch it's just as it's horrifying, because it's not like it's something that, like, a lot of people watch this documentary and that, and, you know, I can say this from the perspective of, like, when I watch a documentary about the LGBT community or something, or, like, a retelling of those kinds of stories, I can watch it from an outsider and think that that's really horrible. But at the same time, I can then walk out in the street and not have to worry about how you guys are treated. But then when watching that documentary, I understand how it is to an extent, because it's that I'm watching something that tomorrow that could be me, or that could be one of my friends. Like, any day we could end up, like, you know, murdered on the street just for having... I mean, like, I've had friends in that were attacked for using a cane. Like, they're goths and they use a cane. They use a cane because they're disabled. Excuse me. And you've got people that use the excuse, like, when they beat this person up of, oh, well, yeah, but they have a weapon. It's like, no, they have a fucking walking stick, you twat. And yeah,
it's sad.
Again,
well,
like,
in a world
fatigue.
In a world that needs expression and color and beauty, in a world that desperately needs it, and for someone who just wanted to express herself and did so magnificently, she paid the price.
Yep. It was like, yeah, and it's unfortunately it comes down to, it is the fault, like, you know, people can turn around and go, oh, well, it's nobody's fault, it's the fault of the people attacked. It's the fault of those kids, because they were kids. Yeah,
they murdered her.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's murder, and it doesn't get any easier every year that those kinds of things still happen.
It's the same with Orlando. Like, any time of an anniversary of the Orlando shooting in Florida, of the Pulse nightclub, it doesn't get any easier, because
it still happens.
It still happens. And it's also the fact of, when that happened, whenever I stepped out of my house, I was always looking over my shoulder, because I knew for a fact, because it's happening more and more now.
Yeah.
It was happening a lot then. It's happening more now.
Yeah.
If I stepped out of my door, anything could have happened to me.
Yeah.
I could have been jumped.
At any moment.
At any moment. And so I was scared to hold the hand of my then partner.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I have to be able to protect myself. And it was a case of going back into the closet ever so slightly.
Just to stay safe.
Basically. And I don't think anyone, except those who know what it's like, can grasp or even understand just how horrible it is to even consider such a course of action.
The second you see someone moving out the corner of your eye, your heart stops, because you know that could be it. Like, I remember a couple of years ago, we've been in a pandemic for a couple of years, but, you know, like, back when I was still in college, I went out we have a metal night in Dundee that happens every wee while, or used to happen every wee while, and I went out to it, and it was just after our friend had passed. It was that weekend, because they had played a song in dedication to him. or them at that point. Yeah, and I remember coming home, and it was with a mutual friend of mine and my partners, because they had stayed home because they were ill. And we were walking home, and we were walking past Abertay University, and about 6 men came out. And obviously, I've gone to a metal night. I've got my hair, up and flowing as it does. I've got my coat on. I've got the makeup on. Like I'm walking around looking fucking beautiful.
Hot as hell.
Oh yeah. And yeah, several people came out and decided to try and attack us. Now, he wasn't a goth or anything. Like, he just looked like a regular guy. He just happened to like metal music. Had a beard. But yeah, I ended up with several people trying to, we had several people jump out at us just because I was a goth. And it wasn't until after the altercation was over and we were walking home that he then just went over to me and went, I didn't believe that this kind of thing happened. And it's like, yeah, when I say that I get jumped on a regular occasion, when I say that people come out and attack, and it's probably the same for you and any people of color, it happens regularly. Like, so many people look at it and it's just like, oh, but I never hear about it around where I am. No, of course you damn well don't. You don't listen. Like, it happens constantly, and it's as well, so many people look at you as if you've made it up, and it's like, no. People have to live their life in fear, and it's not fair. Like, it's terrifying.
It just reminds me of my father, actually. It's just like, there's just such an inattentive way of living. It's like, when I said, the first time it happened to me, and I said it happened, he was just like, what do you mean? And I'm sat there going like, I was literally attacked.
Yeah.
And he was just like, are you sure about that? And I was like, I've
what
got
do you mean, am I sure?
And I literally stripped my shirt off and I showed him the bruises and I was like, is this proof enough? I went off my head. I was so angry, and I literally went to him and I said, this is what happens when you do not pay attention.
Yeah.
And I literally told him that you live in such a world and in such a way that you don't even know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, if you actually paid attention to the world around you, there are certain things happening right now that should keep you up at night.
Yeah.
That should, like...
To your own kid.
I know, it's like, there are things that that might happen to me and my brother and my mother that should keep you up at night, and it is very telling that it doesn't.
Yeah, it's such a common thing, and excuse me, I remember in high school, I was the weird kid in high school.
Same.
And I always wore suits and that. I actually got detention for wearing a suit in high school, because I wasn't allowed to be one of the hall monitor prefect kind of when I was in 5th year, because I was considered too much of a troublemaker because I was got in fights because people beat me up all the time. So I learned how to fight. But I was considered a troublemaker for that. So I wasn't allowed to be a prefect. So I wasn't allowed the bright blue suit that they got. So I wore a black suit. Still school uniform. Was black. That was our uniform, was black or a blue suit. I went black suit. And I remember getting detention for that. And it was, and they started asking me things like, why do you always act out? And I was like, what do you mean? It's like, well, you're always getting in fights. And it's like, no, I always have people attacking me. And my partner, she can tell you the amount of times that I've come home in the 6 years we've been together, at least 3 to 9 times a year, I come home with bloodied knuckles and a beat up face. Because of people that attack me. And it's not like I go out looking for a fight. No. I'm lucky that I'm built like my family's military. So I'm built in a way that I'm able to defend myself. But there are people like Sophie that they're not fighters. No. And in my opinion, I should never have had to be a fighter.
No one who was bullied should ever have had to become a fighter.
Yeah. No one should be bullied.
No.
Especially not just for falling in love. Because,
or looking the way she did.
Yeah.
She was beautiful.
Yeah.
She was a stunning, stunning girl. Because I remember the photographs and I'm sat there just going how could someone genuinely do that? What monsters are among us?
I would love to honestly ask the kind of people that scream at me in the street or that try to attack me. I would love for them.
What do you see?
Yeah, I've asked several, and their answer is, well, you're a freak. And it's like, how is that enough reason for you? But it's such a stigma, and there was such a huge stigma with goths that I'm glad that in a way LGBT, unfortunately you guys have your own stigmas and that are put on you without need, but I'm glad that you don't have the stigma of every goth is a school shooter, because it's such a horrible thing that, like, we've had people like Sophie and that, sweet people that have died for being beat up just for how they look, and so many people are able to justify it with, oh, well, that school shooter was a goth. No, he wasn't.
No.
He just happened to have a fucking trench coat.
No.
Goths are sweet people. No. Aurelio Voltaire, the modern singer, not the, what's his name? Theologist. Like, he's such a sweet guy.
No.
And he's a goth.
No,
he's also a professor.
We don't have the stigma of school shootings. We just have the stigma of being sexual predators.
Yes, that's one. Or the, like, hugging you will give a disease.
Yeah. Which like, we're either plague carriers or we're sexual predators.
Which is unfair.
Mm-hmm. Or and like Russia, oh god, like I cackle.
That was my pain.
It's your pain. It's no longer mine. Like
Square of Pain.
I know, Square of Pain. We love her. We knew we were going to see her one day. But honestly, Russia, I loved how when we were doing the Winter Olympics, they were like, keep the gays away from our children, because the Russian government apparently thinks that all gay people are pedophiles. And somehow there are some Americans, there were some people in New Zealand, in Australia, it was just like, what even are they talking about? When they said that gay marriage was a slippery slope to things like bestiality and necrophilia and pedophilia. And I'm sat there going like, oh my fucking god, you are not even on the same planet as I am.
Yeah, statistically speaking, straight people are much more likely to do all that.
Exactly. Oh.
Yeah, it's painful. But onto a slightly less, like, you know, again, continue to rest Sophie, and, you know, honestly, I hope the people that did it never get out. Mm-hmm. And my condolences to the family, as per every year, my condolences still. You do great work with the charity though and whatnot, and I'll actually leave a link to the charity in the description since it's the anniversary.
Well, to continue in gothic spirit, she is an angel, but she is an angel with black wings.
Damn fucking right. But onto a slightly, you know, that wonderful bell of the glasses clinking together there being you know, a nice bell to move towards. You were wanting to talk about art and the way that expression in that.
In the 15 minutes we have left.
Yes. Although, I mean, taking our wonderfully, like, you guys, the gaps that get edited out are hilarious. The amount that me and Ryan pause to think, you wouldn't believe that there's like 10 minutes that get edited out of just solid silence.
Basically, it's all incredulity. That is literally all the silences are. We're just looking at each other, just going like, I am in physical pain. Someone take me to the vet and have me put down.
Yeah.
But expression. Well, I was actually wanting to ask you, so it'll be like a back and forth thing. And we were talking yesterday about things like creation and stuff like that, and artistry. And actually, I was watching an interview actually on YouTube, and it was J.R.R. Tolkien from 1967 talking about The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and its growing popularity, because by the time it hits the 60s, America is basically sucking Tolkien's dick. They love this.
Yeah.
They love the book, and it's become a sort of staple of the anti-Vietnam, anti-nuclear, and peace movements. Like, I remember people were saying that if you went into a subway in New York, you had writing on the wall saying Frodo lives, and stickers like Gandalf for president.
Yeah.
It was hysterical. But no, it was literally just about the creation and creating Middle Earth, and like how
world building and that kind of
basically, and how the books grew. And it's like, well, with your imagination, how does it all actually grow for you?
I guess that depends. Like, if we're talking in regards to like my little passion project or that, like, because I do Final Fantasy animations and that for fun, but for my passion project, I guess it spawns from a mix of how I'm feeling and how I see things and how I'd like to see them. So like I write a lot of like a mix between light and dark kinds of things. Like, you know, there's always a bit of comedy or that, but it completely depends, because I've got characters that are based off of like one of my, you know, pilot series and that I was working on for a while. Like with that, you've got characters that are, you know, LGBT, and I had tons of input from LGBT people and that. to try and justify both how good and how bad it is. Because, like, you know, you guys have the same kind of issue. Like, there's no such thing as any sexuality that doesn't have abusive relationships and that. And it was kind of a way of showing that, but it was a way of showing also what a good LGBT relationship looks like in that series. And there were, like, you know, police officers that just, you know, it's the way that pressure can push you to end up, like, you know, being efficient, but also sociopathic and things like that. And because I was feeling pretty detached at the time. Also, I'm always a stickler for giving the middle finger to what people want to happen. Like, I have ended at least 3 of my series with the bad guy being the hero in the end. One of them being this psychopath literally taking the victory, like, you know, big bad guys at the end about to kill the hero, and then, you know, the antagonist of the series comes in, kills the villain, saves the hero, and goes down off a building with his fingers up like, ha-ha! Like, that's
excellent.
Always been my kind of thing. Like, I've got an entire series that's about a hero that doesn't want to be a hero. Like, he's a demigod that, like, the world has pretty much ended. Humanity's nearly extinct.
See, that feels so realistic. A hero that doesn't want to be a hero.
Yeah, he spent like 70 years saving people, but every time he did, he either got persecuted more or a bigger creature would come along, and he just kind of got sick of this kind of infinite ramp up. So he just kind of went, no, fuck it, I'm getting a house in the cottage and I'm going, no, never being a hero again. So the whole series is him literally teaching someone who's come to find him and be like, can you be a hero again? And it's him being like, yeah, sure, I'll be a hero. And the whole time he's subtly teaching her to be a hero, so he never has to do it again.
I love it. I need it. I need it like 2 years ago. But no,
I think I started writing it like 2 years ago.
But no, I do remember.
How I feel is a huge thing.
Remember, you sent me one of your animations. I think it was from our D&D, one of our first D&D campaigns.
Oh,
and it was just like, oh, put it down. No, put it down.
Yes.
And I'm sat there just going like, why does that live in my head rent free?
Because it is perfect.
It really is. And it's like, crap.
Yeah, D&D again is a huge writing medium for me. Like, the way that I'm not like, you know, the campaign that we're doing together and that I haven't fully gotten into the swing yet because I decided to play a comedy character. But a lot of the other campaigns in that I do, some of them are comedy. I'm an alcoholic dwarf in one that's racist.
A comedy character that melts people's faces off.
Yeah.
And I'm sat there going like, ooh.
Yeah, he's a jester that melts people, which is hilarious, and steals food.
And looks like the Phantom of the Opera with his teeth all just going like,
yeah, Joy being half dragon. But it's, a lot of my inspiration comes from things like D&D and role-playing games, because it allows me a world to escape to, and then there's situations that happen that are just so ridiculous that I want to retell them, but I'm no good at writing, so my way of retelling them is visual. And that's why I do, like, you know, I stream on Twitch while I'm gaming and that, excuse me. But as well, I animate and I, like, redraw scenes that happen in D&D, in Final Fantasy. Things that just, my friends are a massive inspiration. The ridiculous shit that, like, all of us do together gets turned into an animation in one way or another.
Oh, God, I really want to see Ilya in his pirate gear. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, trust me, that's going in there. Like, I'm waiting for. I've got what's called probably the big inspiration for, because I always start off with one like 3-minute scene, and that's how I expand a series or a set of animations. I always call them hero moments, which is the moment that a character really establishes themselves in my head of, like, it's the moment that I'm able to piece them together as a person and be like, that is who you are to me.
See, I remember, it's like, following off of that point, actually, like the 3-minute thing and the expansion, it just reminds me of Hayao Miyazaki. How he does, like, the storyboards for all his films. I remember... I can't remember if it was a video or if it was just like certain clips that they've done, and it was just him just going like, oh, this film will never get done, and it's just like, well, this man has such an imagination. It's such
amazing.
It's absolutely fantastic.
Storyboards and that you were saying.
Yeah, it's just like he has such this massive idea inside of his head, and God knows, like, his mind is like windows into other worlds.
It's really fascinating. I love as well the he's very profusely, like, I mean, his movies and that, some of them like Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind, for instance. It looks like it has very, you know, environmental, like, ecological disaster kind of feelings to it. Same with Princess Mononoke. Excuse me. However, I like that he adamantly says that no, that's not the idea of this at all. Mm-hmm. And I like how that resonates with me a bit, because like with Somnus, it's it's the end of the world because of an ecological disaster, but that wasn't actually the main theme. It just happens to tell that story. It just
happens, yeah.
And I love also that happens.
Yeah, it was also the same with things like Howl's Moving Castle, how that was sort of like his analogy of war. Though the original writer of the books, Diana Wynne Jones, when she wrote the books, like the war was a very sort of out of the way sort of thing.
Yeah,
like
it was
happening,
there.
We just didn't talk about it, and we didn't participate in it. But whereas in the film, the war is made a bigger presence than it actually is.
Grew up in the war,
so did she.
Yeah, but I mean, like it's an interesting thing with the Japanese, because again, I'd need to actually speak to like Hibiki or something, like, you know, one of the guys that I know over there. Although I mean, Hibiki is about our age, so it's a bit young. But either way, like, you know, his dad or something, and ask like what was it like, you know, things like that, because I know the war is very different from their perspective, as it is from any other country's perspective. I mean, you know, yeah, Germany is able to hold its hands up and go, yeah, our previous leaders weren't great. But with Japan, it's an interesting thing, because it's kind of this balance between we did bad things, but it's also this thing of, you know, and we'd like to change, we'd like to evolve. Like, Japan has really, you know, changed how it works ever since. However, there's also this idea that they don't want to lose their tradition, and they feel like if they give up and kind of go, well, yeah, no, you guys were right, that they'll lose everything that they have.
Mm-hmm. See, I remember actually, I think Japan's one of the only countries that are completely nuclear free. Like weapon-wise.
Weapon-wise, yes. That's
weapon-wise. Power-wise, they've got it, but weapon-wise, they will not allow nuclear weapons on their soil at all.
Yeah, it's a mix between they signed a treaty with America and Korea, I think, basically saying that they're allowed a defensive force but no form of offense, and they decided that after what happened at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they don't want anything to do with it.
No,
which is understandable in my opinion.
I find that incredibly telling, how the country that witnessed hellfire, literal hellfire, like had the power of the sun itself dropped on them, and everyone else thought, this is a great idea.
Yeah,
let's arm ourselves with this. It feels like some form of Faustian bargain. It really does, like infinite knowledge for infinite destruction. How the nuclear weapon was not the moment when the human race said, we've gone too far, destroy all the research, destroy everything. We will never speak of this. We will never, ever have this used again.
Even not destroying the research, because again, we end up with nuclear fission because of it, which not great form of power, but it's cleaner than things like coal and that. And that's giving birth slowly towards fusion power, which...
Oh yeah, like the nuclear fission thing, like nuclear power was actually done in the 30s. You could manage that. Like the entirety of Chicago was powered by nuclear energy.
They'd cracked it, but I mean, like, unfortunately the bombs gave us a way of figuring out that we could do more. We could make fusion, which was, you know, I mean, we're only beginning to crack that 100 years later nearly. But yeah, I don't know why we started making bigger and bigger bombs. I don't feel like
it's frightening.
Yeah. It's the fact that they exist at all. I mean, like, you know, Americans, call me out if you want, but from a Brit's point of view, it's like looking at the world from that is like looking at America from the Brits' point of view. Of, you say that you have guns to protect yourself, but you wouldn't have to protect yourself against guns if there were no guns in the country. And it's that, because like most gun crime here happens when someone gets a hold of an armed police officer's gun. If there were no armed police officers in Britain, we would have much less gun crime than we already do. We do get some of it because, you know, you can't stop it.
The most recent shooting in Plymouth, he had a gun license.
Yeah.
So it's a case of, like, big example actually, Dunblane, that happened in, I believe, 96, 97.
Yeah.
And it was another school shooting. Someone went into a primary school and had killed. A few teachers were killed, and students were as well. They were very young. But the moment that happened, Scotland had actually very liberal gun laws. But the moment Dunblane happened, a law was passed to say, hand over your weapons if you do not have a license.
Yeah,
and
it was not
everyone complied. Everyone who didn't have a license, they were just like, nope. They handed them over because
we didn't want that to happen again.
It was like Dunblane terrified people.
Yeah,
and like Australia, they have very, very rare gun violence because they have very strict gun laws. But whereas with America, the gun violence there, it's so prominent. It's just it's so frequent. It's now become a facet of everyday life that if you don't have a school shooting, then there's something
weird
wrong.
has happened. Yeah, and it's like, again, we get, it stands with your rights and whatnot, and we're not making fun of your beliefs. It's just something that we don't understand personally. But at the same time, it's very much looking at nuclear weapons is very much the same. It's, you say that you want nuclear weapons to protect from nuclear weapons, but if nobody has them, you don't need them. Mm-hmm. And who the hell are you going to fight other than yourself anyway? Mm-hmm. At this point, there are 4 superpowers in the world. There's Europe, Russia, China, and America. Mm-hmm. And they're all partners with each other. Who the fuck is going to fire the first thing if you're all friends? Come on.
Well, that was like during the Cold War. Like at the Friedrichstrasse checkpoint, when the Berlin Wall went up, there were 2 tanks. Because if they all said if the world was ever going to end, it would happen at Checkpoint Charlie, because there were 2 tanks, and there were 2 tanks on opposite sides. So you had, on the American side, you had on the East German side, and there were 2 tanks. They were just looking at each other, and they would wave their gun sticks up and down at one another and rev at each other. The tension there was palpable for at least 30 years. And everyone was terrified because they all knew that if something happened, it would happen in Berlin.
Yeah.
And then the Cuban Missile Crisis happens in 1963, and that scared the shit out of everyone.
Which honestly should have been the final straw to denuclearize the planet, in all honesty. Like, that's one thing that we need to do towards a step towards the whole carbon, emissions issue is, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, weapons manufacturing needs to be, at the very, very least, worldwide ramped down. Mm-hmm. I get that, it is a business and that, and it does hire a lot of people, but at the same time, if you're selling the same weapons to everyone around the world, then you're the only one benefiting. So just, it needs ramped down.
I think it's also a case of, we need our leaders to stop having this dick measuring contest and actually band together to solve the problem of climate change.
Well, yeah, again, we have the something 20 whatever coming up in November to try and figure this out. But again, the Middle East and China, last time there was this meeting, both of them went, no, we refuse to go carbon negative or carbon neutral. And so every country turned around and went, well, it's not my responsibility to do it. And it's like, it is.
It's everyone's responsibility. Our leaders need to show some balls.
Yeah. If you think about it in the respects of, this might not, single children might not understand this, but in the respect of if you have siblings, you're not going to sit there and be like, oh, well, my little brother won't clean up his stuff, so I don't have to. You'll do it to show your brother that, haha, I'm better than you. Mm-hmm. Even if the reason that we go carbon neutral is because that's our next dick measuring contest, who can be best for the environment, I would appreciate this.
I would. There would be change at least, because, the Mississippi, I believe it was the Mississippi, it's flooded.
Jesus.
22 people have died.
That's insane. And the Thames, when it flooded, my aunt lives on the border, not on the border, the coast of the Thames. Mm-hmm.
Stratford, is it not?
No, Victoria Dock.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
That's Titanic all over again.
She lives at Victoria Dock. That's just washed away if that floods.
Jesus.
No, thankfully she works at Stratford. Mm-hmm. So she was there when that flooded. But yeah, and it's crazy to see the Thames burst its banks, but we knew it was coming.
Yeah.
We need to really work at it. And it's like everyone's so excited about the next Titanic. Oh, this one definitely won't sink. No, it won't fucking sink. There's no icebergs. Oh. The The rage is back. Can you tell I'm still on some painkillers?
But can you tell we are tired?
Very
tired. We are
tired.
Exhausted.
Like, we create and we publicize our work, and we do what we can as creatives to both escape this world and try to communicate that it needs to be better. But at the same time, it's that issue of, for all respects, we live in fantasies, and we write down our fantasies for other people to escape to. I would love to see one day our fantasies come to life. To see real, not even like dragons and that be around, but to see heroes stand up and spearhead revolutions that make the world a better place. I would love to see that one day. Like, I would love to see a full, like, you don't even have to go around, like, you know, full extremist terrorism style, like V for Vendetta. Like, just, I would love to see people find a way to communicate and change the way that politics works for the better. Because in all honesty, that's what's stopping us. It's not an inability to find funding. It's not that we're too late. It's that governments and big businesses have no motivation to change.
No.
And unfortunately, they do have us all in their pocket. I mean, there's one company that owns pretty much the majority of food sales. So we can't avoid them.
No.
So we can't boycott them without starving ourselves. So we need a way of communicating and holding them to account.
Yeah. Well, then again, look at what's been happening in Parliament recently. Boris Johnson and his cabinet got ripped to shreds over the Afghan thing.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. Even Theresa May ripped into them.
And then they had a veteran who's become an MP stand up and tell his experience. There was absolute silence. Boris Johnson tried to make a response. Not a single person would let him talk because they knew it was just like, there are no excuses. There are no excuses now. You need to answer for this.
I do appreciate, like, Theresa May. Like, you know, I sure, she's not exactly the greatest leader that we've ever had, or a great person. She did get thrown into the deep end of a situation and dealt with it the best she could. Props to her for that. But at the same time, you know, not great. But at the same time, I appreciate what she said the last time that I was watching anything political, where she turned around and said, we are the greatest intelligence country in the world. What does that tell you about the fact that we didn't see this coming? How bad did we fail at our job?
Again, it was like back in the Cold War. It was like back before 9/11. We weren't talking to each other. We weren't telling each other anything. Like, the Berlin Wall could have been stopped. We just weren't talking with one another. We weren't liaising with one another. And then we were just sat there going like shock.
I personally am both, and I both advocate for and against globalization. Because globalization in a lot of ways does mean the end of culture. Like, we were talking about this earlier, the fact that we look at a lot of other countries with a very empirical view because of the way that we were raised. And the fact that we were raised in the British Empire, kind of some empire. But we were raised in it, and so we have that very Western view of these kinds of traditions and that are just wrong or weird to us. And so a lot of culture does die due to globalization, unfortunately, and modernity. However, I also feel like, in a way, a global communication and a global system in which everyone is on the same playing field, in a way, is a good idea. Because then it means that shit like Afghanistan, like the disaster in Afghanistan that's happening at the moment, doesn't happen. Shit like the Berlin Wall doesn't happen.
See, that's what the UN was meant to be all about. And look at them now.
They do sweet fuck all.
I know. And, like, I also feel really upset about the UN, mainly because the words of H.G. Wells are etched on their charter. And that man prophesied so much. He prophesied air flight. He prophesied going to the moon. He prophesied world government. Yeah. He prophesied all of this.
Wells was a genius.
Wells was an absolute genius, and I fucking love him. Socialist to boot. I absolutely adore him. And also an advocate for free love.
Yeah, and technology for the advancement of everyone as well. He was an advocate for that.
And then he said, I remember start of World War II. I remember he was by then an old man. He would die near the end of the war, and he just he turned to someone younger and he said, "I told you so."
But I agree with people like Plato and Charlie Chaplin at the moment, in which Plato once said that democracy is not freedom, it is the breeding ground of fascism. And like with Charlie, when he sat there and kind of snapped when he was doing
the Great Dictator.
Yeah, where he just kind of snapped and went on that rant. Like, I agree with them so much.
Exactly. Do not become machine men with machine hearts.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's what we're becoming, both towards foreign policy, towards our fellow humans, but towards our neighbors, towards our own family in some cases. Again, taking your father as an example, the people that look on with not even distaste, but with discare. That we need...
It's just more like, we need people to pay attention.
We need people to stand up and say, I'll help, or I agree, or even I disagree, but not in violence, not in anger.
Absolutely not, because it needs to be in discourse. Like, I do not mind if people disagree with me, because it starts a conversation.
Yeah. Have conversations, have discussions, be civil about them, but be passionate about them. If you disagree with me and Ryan, for instance, good, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, we say these things because they are our opinions, and we will not be offended if people disagree with our opinions. If they disagree with our existence, then yeah, sure, we're going to take offense.
So literally, the thing of it is like, if you don't agree with our opinions, that is totally fine. Educate us as well. If we say something wrong, please do educate us, because we are open to being educated.
And that's,
you have to be.
Yeah, the world needs more of that. The world needs to be open to passionately talk and debate about the way the world is going to go. Because honestly, sitting here in stagnation, trying to return to the way things were, especially
we can't sustain that.
Yeah, there's no way, like, we cannot go back anymore.
No.
We have to figure out how to go forward. So we need voices to stand up. We need people to talk. We need people to agree. We need people to argue. We need more variety in opinion, and we need more people to agree on one basic universal truth, which is we need to change. And we need to change now. And on that note, I think that with editing out our silence, that we've probably hit a good point to end on. So
we have indeed.
And yeah, I feel like a good ending note for me to end on is, especially when it comes to like men. Unfortunately, it is a very common thing and a very known thing that cis white men rule the world right now. So I say to all of those cis white men that have the privilege to be able to rise up the ranks in society without discrimination, it is your job to make sure that LGBT, people of color, that women can rise up the same way that you did. It is your job to stand for them, not because I am manly man, I am big, strong, get here. Be like Aragorn in Lord of the Rings. Be like him. Love your fellow man, even not in a sexual way, but love your fellow man as a brother, as a sister. Help everyone around you all you can. Use your privilege as a way of communicating that the world needs change and the world needs more love, both platonic and non.
If you have the power to lift someone up, it is your duty to do so.
In every way.
It's the only way we can move forward is by helping each other.
Yes. And on that note, we shall see more accurately, you'll hear us next week.
Take care, everyone.